Hello, everybody. Welcome along to the Event Industry News Podcast. My name is James Dixon, and as always, I wish you a very good morning, good afternoon, or evening, whenever or wherever you tune in today's podcast from. And I slip over my usual introduction slightly there because a lot of the time when we have guests on the podcast, they're joining us from the USA and North America, and they are behind us in time from where we're recording in the UK. This afternoon, for my guest, it is the opposite direction because my guest joins us from Hong Kong today. More about our guest in just a moment, but a little bit about what we're going to be talking about. Remo.co is relevant to today's conversation. The team behind an online interactive events platform that connects people in a more authentic way. When its founder, Hoyin Cheung, left an online meeting, he couldn't shake the feeling that he just couldn't connect with people in the same way that he could connect with someone in the real world. Worse yet, he noticed time and again that social media had actually become anti-social. So he asked a simple question: what's stopping us from cultivating online relationships that are every bit as meaningful and enriching as relationships that develop in person? I'm delighted to say that joining the podcast is the gentleman who posed that question, joining us from Hong Kong, the founder and CEO of Remo, Hoyin Cheung. Hoyin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, James. That was a really great words and intro that you got for me. So I'm really happy to be on this podcast. So thank you for inviting me.
No, a pleasure to have you here. And I posed the question at the start very, very deliberately. That's something that I lifted from your website, but I suppose that's a great place to start. The question you pose: what's stopping us from cultivating online relationships that are every bit as deep, meaningful, and enriching as those that develop in person? What was stopping us from doing that, Hoyin?
Yeah. So when we started before the pandemic, and a lot of the challenges that were before the pandemic, and some continue today, are the way how we look at events and virtual meetings, especially events, is that it's at a very we look at them as a meeting, and we use tools that are for meetings. So like we use Zoom, or we use like a video conference call. A video conference call originated from conference call, which is purely a machine in the room with a bunch of people talking. They just took that same thing and made that into video form. But when you think about events, those social dynamics are very different, and that wasn't really fully represented by this traditional version one of communication, which is just basically a meeting. I'll give you an example. Like if you were going to network or going to an event where you would meet people, there's a lot of many small conversations happening at the same time. Whereas in a traditional boardroom meeting, and you have 10, 12 people, it's only one person that's speaking at once at any point in time. There's no multiple conversations. So a lot of the difficulty to create meaningful relationships is that it's not intimate. Really great conversation happens in small groups, not really anything larger than 6. And that makes it extremely difficult to create authentic conversation that drives a meaningful relationship, which is what Remo's mission is about.
Do you know that's such a simple identifier? What you've just said there is that at an event, lots and lots of individual conversations are taking place. But that's something that if you think about some of the conferencing platforms that we all merged across to very, very quickly, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Google Meet, etc., it really only does facilitate one conversation happening at a time. And when people first started to try and utilize those platforms to create some type of online event, that really is the major hindrance, isn't it? It really prohibits people from having multiple conversations like they do at a real life event.
That's right. And that really is the biggest thing that holds us back. And by solving that, which is what Remo has done, we've been able to replicate that experience and be able to create it into an experience where you can meet people and actually create a relationship out of that much more easily. Before it's possible, but it was difficult. Now we at Remo, because of the way how we approach events, you can create relationships extremely easily. In fact, the average person at our event makes on average 6 to 8 new relationships per event, that they're actually able to meet and talk to each other. And so that's something that we are really proud of.
And tell me about the developmental process, because you posed this question, you decided that there was a gap in the market, that it was something that you could pursue and do better than what was out there at the moment. What were you doing prior to Remo? You know, what is your background in software development? Is it in events? Is it in both of those things?
Yeah. So, well, funny enough, my background was in social media. And when I saw what was happening with social media, it's kind of like, watching the beef get made, or I don't know, why working at McDonald's and you're like, oh, I don't want to eat at McDonald's anymore. Like you're just watching the actual process of the sausage being made. That's the term. Um, and then that was really what drove me to realize that experiences online aren't really that authentic, really. Like it's very difficult to really have a deep conversation with people when you're just talking to people online. So I did that. And then prior to and I also led a remote team, like a fully remote team prior to the pandemic. I've been leading remote teams for over 8 years. And through leading remote teams, I realized that connecting with each other internally at a company was extremely difficult, very, very difficult. There's really not that many options. And so I started creating a new way to interact with people and a new way to uh, create games or create interactive elements that allow people to really connect. And that's where I found the most joy and the most flow in is creating these very interactive experiences for people. And that's kind of was laid the groundwork for what Remo is today.
And how did that process, when you come up with an idea like this, it always fascinates me to talk to people who've had an idea, especially for a tech platform, and brought it to fruition, brought it to market. Because personally, I wouldn't know where to start. When you have that idea, where do you go? Who do you speak to? How do you decide, actually this is how we're going to do it? To me, it's this process that should take years and years and years, and yet so many great platforms have sprung up, sometimes in a matter of months from the initial conception.
Yeah, I mean, we were developing this prior to the pandemic, and so there wasn't the really dire need for it. So we had a lot of time. I mean, we technically before the pandemic, we spent about a year and a half just working on the platform, actually. So we spent a considerable amount of time testing it and figuring out how to make it work right. In terms of coming up with the idea, I think it's more of like we knew that there was a problem, and we knew we had the mission, which is how do we create authentic conversations that build meaningful relationships through an immersive video experience. We then looked at we then talked to a lot of people and asked them what were the things that were missing. They told us that we got their feedback, and then we then um, did a lot of research looking at all of the different platforms from now all the way to past history. What has kind of what has been tried, like what's tried and what's failed, and and that kind of combination of taking feedback and what's tried and failed and coming up with something that we felt solved a lot of those problems and created a good experience.
And again, what fascinates me is people who are coming up with ideas like this pre-pandemic, that ultimately had huge benefit to people when the pandemic hit. And it is a bit of a brutal question to ask, so I hope you'll forgive me, but in a horrible way, did the pandemic help? Because you had this idea, you were already developing it, and suddenly you're presented with this huge global demand for digital meeting platforms, and for people to have to explore new ways of connecting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a bad question at all. I mean, like, I think there's what gravity kind of works. You know what I mean? Like, what comes up must come down. The pandemic's going to go away, right? I mean, it's not optimism. It's being realistic because we will solve it. We will figure it out. Humans need to be human, and we need to connect physically, uh, face to face. So yes, we did benefit from that, but it's not sustainable. It's not long lived. It's a shot of um, stimulation that allowed us to kind of create a business, which is fantastic. But as we move along for the pandemic, we still have to go through that. Like, imagine it's like everyone had to change their business when they go into the pandemic. Well, we have to change our business when we go out of the pandemic. So it's like we have to go through the similar thing, but we're doing it at the tail end. So it all kind of just fits all in place, like it's just yin and yang kind of thing. It all kind of just happens. But it did. Like it did help our business. It was fantastic. What it helped us was to figure out who are the customers that we want to go for. That's really what ultimately is what we took out of it. So that we can then go and build the proper business and help people who really find what's valuable of what we're providing, what we're providing to be truly valuable to their business.
And you mentioned, people have this desire and a human instinct to connect in person and face to face. Whilst the pandemic presented maybe a short to medium term, reliance on digital platforms, the pandemic will end. I agree with you completely. Then, what goes up must come down. We will get out of this. Do you see platforms like Remo then long term sitting alongside in person events, allowing those event communities to grow and develop year round, which is something that historically live event organizers have always struggled with?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Like, I think what the pandemic has allowed is it has broadened and educated everyone that it is possible, and give them an opportunity to actually train and actually go through it a few times and say, oh, well, you know what? It's not that hard. Or, you know what? I figured it out. And so now that they can take those same skills and experiences and apply it post pandemic when it is in the right situation. So hybrid, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, for us, what we found, and it's an area that we're really focused on, is helping large enterprises and large companies host their internal events. And because internal events is great for large enterprises because they might have a very large and wide, broad audience, meaning like their employees are distributed across the world or distributed across the country, and you want to host events to engage them. Right? It's very difficult sometimes to engage people, especially in this hybrid remote work world. And that is something where we found there's a lot of value there for what we can provide.
And I think, well, it's really difficult to do so. And ultimately, what you want people is to go onto the platform and see it for themselves, because that's ultimately how anybody learns these platforms: is go on there, use them. But are you able to sort of describe for us some of the features and what a user would see, and how that in turn benefits them from allowing these sort of meaningful one-to-one conversations with people? How does a platform present itself to somebody if they're logging on via their laptop or their device?
Sure. Yeah. So our platform is like the moment you enter and you land on this map. So just pretend and think that you're on a Google map. You land on a Google map, and then on the Google map, if you guys drive, you'll see, like, or if you look at your phone, it'll have a circle. They'll show you where exactly you are on that map, and that circle is typically like a blue circle, right? But in our platform, it's actually got a profile picture of your face there. And when you zoom in, and it's already pre-zoomed in, it's not like, the view of the entire city. It's already pre-zoomed in into this building, and you can actually see the seats and the rooms and the tables inside this building. And you're sitting on one of those seats. And you can double click onto any table and you will move to that table. And let's say, James, you're sitting there and Margaret is sitting there. I will immediately see the video streams of you and Margaret the moment that I enter into that table where you guys are sitting. And I can jump in and say, hi, how's it going? And have a conversation.
This is straight away, the description that you give there is changing some of the experiences that I've seen of virtual event platforms, which are still very much web orientated. It's taking the classic elements of website design that we've been familiar with, for probably 25, coming up 30 years now. But, in terms of structure, scrolling down, tabs that you click on, text based, etc., etc. Was it really important for you to try and break away from probably a lot of thinking that's gone on in web development, in social media platforms, how we interact on all those different types of platforms, to really almost try and clear your mind of anything that you knew before, to give yourself a blank canvas?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we really had to rethink what is really important in human interaction and look at it from how do you make it as human as possible. And we did have to, I mean, essentially, when you think about it, like you see all these circles on the map and people are moving around on this map and talking to each other. And that actually is more like a game than your traditional software.
Well, straight
Um,
away, I'm thinking like something like Fortnite.
yeah,
some of these games now that the idea you're in a virtual world, so the idea of presenting it visually whilst you're still sat at your desk or wherever you
yeah,
may be sat on your device, the idea of presenting somebody on screen with a visual representation of where they may be straight away from a psychological point of view help somebody to picture and envisage themselves at an event more than they would be just scrolling through something that's more traditionally website based.
that's right. So you're absolutely right. So we're actually more like a game than business software. A game is more about experience, and we care about the experience that the guest has. So you're 100% correct. Like it's really uh it's not software really. It's really actually a game. Yeah.
And that's not anything new. When I think back to sort of the earliest incarnations of Super Mario Brothers, on Nintendo,
Yeah.
in between levels, you would have this sort of map layout of where you were, and you would see Mario move into the next level, and then the level would start. These
Yes.
ideas of
Absolutely.
presenting users in the gaming industry with a visual representation of where they may be in the game is been like that for sort of 40, even 50 years in the late
Yeah.
70s with
100%.
Atari. So it's
Yeah.
fascinating that really from an event platform point of view, we are only really just sort of catching up to some of the stuff that the gaming industry's been doing for decades.
Absolutely. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Um, and tell me again, sort of, I love sort of trying to talk through the journey of platforms like this and the launch, the research, the beta testing. When you do all your research, you do all your program, you test it, you get your teams to test it, you maybe go through some beta testing with event organizers that you may know. How does the sort of the launch manifest itself, getting users on board, and how difficult or easy a process was that depending on when you did launch in the pandemic?
So really, when you're trying to launch or create something new, you're constantly launching. Actually, you're constantly launching. You're launching again and again and again and again because you're trying to get people to use it. And so we probably launched like technically probably like 7 times. Just continually launching, continually trying to get people interested, changing it a little bit and launching it again. I mean that process is difficult. I mean it's getting the first $1 million of revenue. As they say, is the toughest part, and it's true. It is the toughest part. But once you get the traction and once you get it there, it becomes a lot easier. There's a lot of working with people, working with events, people doing things for free at the beginning, offering something just to get more attraction. It's a lot of hustling, a lot of work there for sure.
Hustling. I always love the phrase hustling. It's a great phrase because it really is that, and a hustle. Sometimes it could be a bit derogatory term to hustle somebody, but I think when you're hustling in an industry that shows sort of great dedication, and drive, and like you said, it takes a great amount of hustle to do this. In terms of the markets and the different sort of verticals that present themselves in the events industry, again, that must be maybe not complicated, but something that you need to step back and address once you've got a platform like this ready to go, because events vary in different sizes. With a digital platform, often we have this great position where a digital platform can be scaled up or down very easily. And of course, you've then got clients who may be dealing with their own events internally. You may have a representative from the
Right.
client. You've then got agencies. You've then got, you know,
Yeah.
agencies who are dealing with portfolios of clients who all may have a need. How do you address sort of each one of those verticals, up to sort of agency level and right down to sort of the PA of the CEO who just wants to organize the company event?
Yeah, so we have a lot of different types of customers. We work with a lot of agencies. We have our own agency program, and the way how we work with the agencies is we have a program, we have a team that all they do is just to work with agencies and make sure they're successful. So in some ways, agencies are our customers in some ways. And so we are very involved in training and selling with them and making sure that they have all the tools necessary to succeed. Our agency program actually won an award for being one of the top agency programs in the event industry. So that's something that we really care about and we're really proud about. When it comes to like for other customers like PAs or anyone else from the corporate side, we have a very extensive customer success team. And you have a person that will literally like walk you through making sure your first event is successful. Our product is DIY, but we help you a lot in order to train you up and get you up to the point where basically like helping you work with you to kind of get that first event running. And so even with people that are very experienced, we're always there just in case, because we want to make sure that, one of the core values of our company is humanity at the center. So how to make sure that you have a very human experience. It's not just technology, it's like a human experience to ensure that you can maximize the most out of Remo, the tool, and us as people that are part of Remo.
That's really interesting that you've got this sort of dedicated team for this agency partner program, and a team that's there to deal with agencies, and that you've identified that, because the skill sets, again, when you identify the difference between an agency dealing with clients specifically working in the events industry, they will undoubtedly, most agencies have a skill set amongst their team where they've used these types of platforms before. They have some experience of creating and working with these digital meeting platforms, and that experience may be very, very different to a direct client that you're working with who maybe has never used this type of platform before. How was that something from the very early days of Remo? You said, right, we need to identify that we may need to have different support levels for different types of client.
Yeah, over time, we realized that. Over time, that we realized that we need different types of support levels. Agencies have have way different needs, very, very different needs than normal customers. So we started diverging that over time.
One thing I must ask is from the sort of the longer term usage. Again, we're programmed in the events industry historically to think that events begin at a certain time and end at a certain time. And that's because, we go to a venue, the doors open at 10 a.m., they close at 5 p.m., and we have that 7-hour window in which we do our business. And again, in the same way that we had to sort of forget some of the ideas of web design and things like that in order to really create these meaningful digital event tools, we probably have to rethink things like timings and when we run these events, how long they can actually run for, durations.
Right.
Again, did that play a big part in your own thinking and how you wanted to then present Remo to clients?
I mean, it made of it. The clients have many different types of events, and they will tell us what they want and how long the events are. Um, in terms of time, like the length of time, that not as much. But in terms of like what kind of floor plans that they want. So one of the key features about Remo is that you can have a customized floor plan. Like you can customize the floor plan to make it as immersive. Like we have floor plans of this um this like chalet up in the hills of looks like a chalet, like in a ski resort kind of thing. And then we have another one that's it's at the rooftop of a building, and you can see it's like kind of al fresco style. Like then you have beaches, and you have like a campfire with like fire, fire just kind of like these little fireplace kind of things on each of the tables, for example. So there's a lot of this immersive stuff, and that has made the experiences for each one to be very, very unique and customized. And that's something that a lot of the customers want. And once they kind of told us these are the types of events that they want, these were their goals, then we started to kind of create some floor plans. And then they also went to other designers, and those designers then made their businesses of creating floor plans just for Remo and for Remo's clients. So we started to kind of have this ecosystem kind of going on that really didn't start to fit exactly what the clients wanted.
From a design point of view, I've just thought of something, and it's really probably insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But you know how we have responsive browsers now. So if I send you a calendar invite, it will adjust itself automatically for your time zone. In the same way, if you've got this rooftop scenario where it may be an external floor plan, is it
Right.
responsive depending on when somebody is joining it. So is it nighttime for somebody who's joining in San Francisco, but daytime for somebody who may be in Berlin? Can you
Oh
get it
yeah.
to respond like that?
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. That's a really good idea. I should definitely like
There we
share that
go.
with the tech team. Yeah,
Commission. There we go. You heard
yeah.
it, everybody. You heard it, everybody. We've got evidence on the podcast.
Yeah.
Well, on the subject of international, you're based in Hong Kong. There will be, just the sheer volume of businesses that are based in Hong Kong, and the amount of internationally based businesses that will have a desire to meet up. You've probably got a local client base there, but presumably because of the nature of the platform, anybody can use this. What is the international representation like at the moment for Remo, and how far has it spread?
So actually, we don't have that many customers in Hong Kong. We don't have that many customers in Asia actually. US is a big market for us. Europe is a big market for us. We also have some presence in Japan. And then we have a bunch of other countries that are around the world, like South Africa and some other countries that
Mhm.
we have presence in. But that's kind of like the representation. Actually, Hong Kong is actually not it's not significant at all. Actually, we barely have any customers from Hong Kong. Actually, yeah,
It's great. Well, do you know what? But the beauty about that is it shows that you can be based anywhere in the world and launch a business now to anywhere in the world. It's particularly if it's tech based, if it's a platform.
absolutely.
You couldn't have done this. There is no way 25 years ago you'd launch anything that's event related and not do it in the territory in which you're operating.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the cool things.
It's
That's one of
it,
the fun things about it.
It really is. What are the plans for 2022? I mean, we're recording this now on the 21st of February. It's probably going to go out in the next couple of weeks, so people may be tuning in and listening to this early March. It's still first quarter of 2022. What are the plans? What's in the pipeline at the moment for Remo?
So we have been doing a lot of partnerships. So a lot of partnerships with people to help us with our growth. There's one area that we are doing more on, which is incorporating food with virtual events. So a lot of virtual events, some people have kind of done it, like they've delivered some food, maybe they organize themselves. We've seen an amazing impact on increasing attendance by introducing food, meaning you order your food through the event and the event delivers it to your door. And so we have vendors where they'll get a pizza delivered to your door wherever you are in the world on like right before the time of the event.
This is crazy now, isn't it? But I suppose if you
Yeah.
think about, platforms like Uber Eats, it's pretty much available in most major cities in most, parts of the
Yeah.
world now. Really, whilst that may sound like spectacularly complicated to do, the reality now, when it's all app based, you use an API, it's probably relatively easy to do.
So now we're seeing not only does it increase attendance, so when you involve food, it increases attendance by anywhere between 40 to 60% attendance, increases attendance. Um, so that's number one. That's like something that's really amazing what we've seen. Number two is that the feedback that people give with when food's involved goes up from like maybe if your feedback was like 3.5, it'll go actually to like a 4.8, 4.9 out of 5, 4.9 out of 5. So it
That's
goes from
crazy.
so 3 to almost like max because the food makes the experience really unique because like I can then we're both eating something that's physical that is familiar. Like it's we can point to it and say, "Oh, you have that pizza, I have that pizza. We're both eating the pizza together." And another thing is that it reminds people to attend the event. I mean, there's so many webinars, there's so many events that people could go to, but when you have a pizza delivered to your door or whatever healthy option that maybe some people eat, you're gonna be like, well, I might as well eat it at the event. Like it serves as a great reminder to engage them in and bring them in because it's very easy to be like, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna type up some more emails and then just go hang out at home and do something else while I'm working from home. It's very easy to just kind of like step away.
This is fascinating, because at the very start of the today's podcast, I asked the question, or the question that you posed: what's stopping us from cultivating online relationships that are every bit as deep, meaningful, and as enriching as relationships that develop in person? And as well as your own platform, the answer to that question is pizza.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? This is amazing. No,
Yeah.
this is great, and you're absolutely right. All joking aside, I've had great conversations at events over lunch or over dinner at an awards event. Food plays such a part in
Yeah,
everybody's
absolutely.
life. You look at
Absolutely.
any culture around the world, how important food is in
Yep.
the cultural and the social aspects of life. That's where
Exactly.
conversations happen. That's where people find out what they've been doing during the day. And to be
Exactly.
able to try and recreate that, all we're doing is that's what we're trying to do, isn't it? We're trying to replicate what we do in real life.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, James. Like, that's exactly what we've seen. That's exactly what we are trying to do, and we see food as a fantastic way that pairs up really well with our product to create these even more deeper relationships. And it shoots. It also helps all the right metrics too. It helps attendance. It helps your feedback, your survey feedback. People really want to get really great survey feedback. This is one way to boost it. Very easy, super easy.
Fantastic. We've been talking on the podcast today to Hoyin Cheung, who is the founder and CEO of Remo, an experiential virtual event platform that empowers you to grow and engage your audience, a virtual experience that rivals in-person events. It's been great to talk to you today, Hoyin. Thanks for sort of extending your working day a little bit to allow for the
No
time
worries.
difference and getting this recorded today. Before we wrap, very, very important to let people know who are tuning in today how they find out more about you, because as we pointed out, this can be accessed from anywhere in the world. So if anybody wants to find out more, where do they go and how do they do that?
Yeah, so you can come to our website, Remo, Remo .co. That's the website of the platform. We've got free trials. We've got um, uh, demo tours. We have a space that you can go in at any time, 24/7, and go and just explore the space yourself. We've got all these different ways to kind of learn about Remo, whichever that fits your fancy. And yeah, there's that. And also, there's also like my LinkedIn as well. I talk a lot about events, and I'm going to post it in here into this chat.
Yeah, great. Yeah, if you
And you
want
can
to,
see if you can do
we'll
that.
put some links up on. We'll put some links up as well. I mean, on social media, you can find the guys at use_Remo is on Twitter. But if you search any of the social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, I know that those guys have got a presence on all of those platforms. And obviously, with your background in social media, Hoyin, I'm sure you're across all of that regularly.
Yeah. Absolutely,
Fantastic.
100%. Thank you.
Fantastic. And of course, if you want to find out a little bit more about what we're up to here at the podcast and indeed at Event Industry News, eventindustrynews.com is the place to go. If you're listening to today's podcast via one of your audio podcast platforms, then you can head over to the Event Industry News website, check out the latest news, features and supplements and everything that's going on in event industry news. Of course, if you're already watching the video of today's podcast, hello to you. Thanks for joining us here on eventindustrynews.com. And don't forget that if you want to listen to audio only versions of all of our podcasts, just go to your chosen podcast platform. And that brings us nicely to the end of today's episode. Our thanks once again to our guest, Hoyin Cheung, founder and CEO at Remo.co. If you want to find out more about them, fascinating conversation today about the world of digital event platforms. And we will see you on the next episode of the Event Industry News podcast. Thanks very much for joining us, everybody, and goodbye.